Hello, welcome to Plant Party, plant identification, tips for ID, sunflowers, Gramma, and much more. It's hosted by Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, and USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. Plant Party is a quarterly webinar series intended for advanced plant training and fun education. I'm Megan Clayton, Professor and Extension Range Specialist with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. My co-hosts are Charles Kniper, State Resource Conservationist with USDA Natural Resource Conservation Service, and Tim Sigmund, the Private Lands Program Leader with Texas Parks and Wildlife Department. We have 17 wonderful door prizes we'll be giving out today as a part of the event. Our door prize donors today are committed to supporting you in your quest to learn more about plants. I'd like to thank Bamert Seed, InView Range and Pasture, Native American Seed, Quail Forever, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, Texas Brigades, and the USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service for donating these neat prizes.
Let's get some housekeeping out of the way. We'll be moving very quickly through 5 presentations today. Please feel free to type your questions into the question and answer box at the bottom of the screen, and we'll answer them privately to you through there. We'll be sharing a link to the recorded webinar in about a week to all registered participants, but not the actual presentations. So be sure to take your own notes as we go.
All right, our first presenter today is Lee Knox. Lee has been with the USDA and RCS for over 20 years. Prior to that, he worked as a county extension agent for Texas A&M AgriLife Extension. Lee received a BS in range from Texas A&M University and an MS also in range from New Mexico State University. He is a 1990 alumni and a director of the Texas section for the Youth Range Workshop. Lee currently ranches on 8 sections near Abilene with his wife and daughter and coaches the Callahan County 4-H Range and Pasture Plant Identification Contest team. Lee will be presenting on plant identification tips. Thanks for kicking off our plant party, Lee. Take it away.
Hey, thanks for the opportunity. I'm honored to be on the panelists today. I've had the fortune of spending a morning with Chip and learning about fours, and so I'm glad he's on it. And Dr. Barron Rector, I've known him since I started my career in range in the 7th grade. So I appreciate Dr. Rector being on the panel too, and me being a part of that. So we'll get started. Going to talk about plant identification tips on rangeland plants. As you can see from my slide, I'm a grass person. I enjoy grasses. The Asteraceae, nobody would ever ask me to give that talk on the sunflower family. But however, I enjoy grasses, and that's the reason I'm going to be talking a little bit later on again about the Grammas. But anyways, the grasses are a little difficult. However, I started this in the 7th grade, half century old now. And so been doing this for a few years, and hopefully I have a few tips to help you on your quest. One other housekeeping deal, let me set me a timer. If you hear ducks in the background, I have run over time. So here's the key, and this is the key, in my opinion, on learning plants. And this is how we started whenever I was a kid and how I start a 4-H team now. We start with developing a core. Now, the core that we develop, and actually did this last night with a young man that's starting on our 4-H plant team. He's in the 5th grade, and we develop a core. And that core we start with for the 4-H plant identification team are the Gramma grasses. And however, the other core that you can develop, and I call this the 70-mile-an-hour core. And so every plant on this list here, you should be able to eventually see, or may already know, and be able to identify while doing 70 miles an hour down the highway. And so I challenge you to develop a basic core. And then once you learn this core, you can add to it. Dr. Dale Rollins does a really good quote. He says, if you learn one plant a week, after 1 year and you take off 2 weeks, you know 50 plants. So if you learn this core that we have here, learn these plants, learn them well, learn where you can identify them while going 70 miles an hour down the road, then you can add one plant a week and you will be a plant expert in your area before long. So let's get started here. The core that I recommend, little blue stem, the picture down here on the right, the maroon color plant that cures maroon later in the spring. There's parts of the state that is lime green. The Texas Hill Country, it's lime green during the growing season. Up in our part of the world, in the Lampasas Cup Plains, it turns to it's an aqua blue color during the growing season. And however, little blue stem is one that you can identify while going down the road. Obviously, the state flower of Texas, Texas bluebonnet, you should be able to identify it, no problem. Texas wintergrass is a little more difficult to identify at 70 miles an hour, but if you ever get one of those spears thrown at you, it doesn't take long to learn Texas wintergrass, or as we called it, speargrass. Upright prairie coneflower, endemic to almost the entire state of Texas, and can be seen, and it has a really long flowering span. So it's actually flowering again now here after a really hard dry out period. And so it makes it where you can see it over a long season, a long span during the summertime. Switchgrass, the tallest grass, primarily the tallest grass of the big four. You should be able to identify it with that clumpiness, especially the Alamo variety, which is super clumpy. And then I'll put in a non-native. I appreciate all plants, and I think the non-natives have a use in this world too. Wilman's lovegrass, it goes in a lot of seed plantings, and the reason is we can tell if the planting is successful. It gives us an early indication whether it is or not. It's not really invasive. It's very showy. And just the other day, I had a producer, he called, he said, what's that plant you said it looks like sergeant stripes? I told him, he said, that's it. We've got a pretty good covering of it on a planting the other day. So anyways, there's the core that I put together. And I guess I put Plains Lovegrass as the writing. That's really Wilman's Lovegrass in the picture. So the second thing I look at doing, I recommend doing is buy a quality regional plant identification book. These are some of the ones I would recommend. Ricky Lennox's book, The Range Plants in North Central Texas, really fits the Central Texas corridor all the way out to Abilene. It gets on the edge of Abilene. It's not quite as good, but Ricky worked in, I followed up Ricky in his job at Abilene. And so it does work in this part of the world. Common range plants in West Central Texas, when you get into the around San Angelo and then south and west of there, that book works really well in that part of the world. And when you get to the Trans-Pecos, so buy a really good quality regional book. When it comes to grasses, I recommend line drawings. A lot of people don't see line drawings very well, but they give you some, they do help on identifying some characteristics that are kind of minute or small. Dual purpose line drawing and picture book is in my opinion, about as good as you can get. Another trick that really helps is to learn the oddities, the things that are unique in this world. And so on the right, I have this picture of black Gramma, and you can see the hairy stem where the leaf has no hair on it. The leaf has no hair on it, but the stem is hairy. And so that plant goes from a gray tan color in the dormant season. During the growing season, it's a gray green color, and it alternates as he goes up. And so those are the oddities that help you start limiting down the potential what plants it can be. And they're easy to remember. White midrib, when we go with the sorghums or eastern gamagrass, square stems, the mint family, beans being the legumes, purple nodes, all the tridents pretty well have some purple noding, white tridents being the most dominant. White leaf edges or margins, Texas bluebonnet, hairy tridents, fluff grass, hairy runners, curly mesquite and vine mesquite both have the hairy runners. different changes in color of the leaf on the top and the bottom, how rough a leaf is. Texas wintergrass, if you feel the leaf on the Texas wintergrass plant, it is coarse. Maximilian sunflower is a good example, another plant that has a really coarse or rough leaf. Having tendrils or not. And so learning the difference. So certain plants have tendrils and the climbing ability. Singletary pea and hairy vetch are a couple of examples of those. But learning those oddities and associating those with the plants, kind of it helps you at least get closer to knowing what the plant might be. There's I'll take a sidestep right here, and if you notice, there are no scientific names on here. I actually recommend learning the common names because the common names are descriptive. They're also regional. And so as you go to different parts of the state, you'll hear common names, and a lot of the common names do a really good job of describing the plant. And so example, we talked about it yesterday, lote bush. Around here, they call it blue bush, not lote bush. Another one is chaparral that it's called in other places. Obviously, chaparral in South Texas is not lote bush, or I wouldn't think it would be. But anyways, we jokingly talk about how the common names are regional, but they have a lot of description to them that help you remember those plants. Another one, Texas wintergrass and speargrass. In the 7th grade, my core was was upright prairie coneflower. Texas wintergrass was the basis of my core because I knew what speargrass was because I threw those at enough of other kids to learn that was Texas wintergrass. And then upright prairie coneflower, that was my other core. And so I generally spend very little time speaking in taxonomic names or in taxonomic nomenclature, especially because of who the clientele I deal with. And so a few other tips that really help. Now, these are not my pictures, and this is definitely not my notes because you cannot read my notes or my ledger. But I recommend keeping a ledger. And so nice little plug here for the Plant Party notebook. And this was actually a 2-time participant in the Texas Section U-Frames workshop and what we call the YR2K U-Frames workshop squared or twice, and which is a more in-depth training. But this young lady, she keeps a immaculate notebook of plants. You can see she draws in the field, and everybody knows that that rewriting and drawing helps fortify and helps you in memory retention. And so I really recommend a ledger. As a young professional, I carried a ledger with me everywhere, and kept a few notes about plants and obviously about other things in that ledger. I highly recommend it. Make a plant collection. And so the center picture is a picture of participants at the U-Frames workshop. They actually receive a plant press like you see over here on the right. That's the branded plant press for the U-Frames workshop. This is actually my daughter's plant press I took a picture of. There are publications. Bobby Joe Ragsdale, Dr. Ragsdale is a longtime extension specialist, and he has there's still a great publication going around on how to collect, press, mount, and store plants. Another way we do it, this is a book out of my office that I use. Those plants are probably 10 plus years old that were shoved in there to help learn those flowering plants. I've always been a grass person and have always struggled with flowering plants or the forbs. And so you can see I've shoved plants into that book to help us remember. As a little, I have a little time here probably. Yeah, I have a little time for a story. So I'm a 1990 alumnus of the Texas Section U-Frames workshop. So I took my plant collection. You know, when you're 18 or 19 years old, a 12-pack of beer is worth a lot of money. And so I traded my plant collection to a Tarleton student, one of my brother's friends, and he turned that plant collection in. I did that again in college. I upped the price to a 20-pack of beer. But you know, it's amazing to me. Randy Rozier's probably graded 2 of my plant collections, and I have no idea what I made on them, but he's at least graded 2 of my plant collections that I traded at some other point in time in life. I wouldn't do that now for $100 or 1,000, but I sure did back then. And so another key to learning and being able to identify plants is to identify plants for other people. I commonly, while we were logged in and getting ready, I received a text from somebody with a picture of three pictures of it, 3 pictures of one plant, and you know, what is that plant? Texted right back, told them what it was. Identifying plants for other people is a really good tool to have, because they're going to bring you stuff that you don't see or you don't know. And so it's really nice when people put it on ruled paper, because you can get an idea for scale. White background makes it a little harder. Before everybody had a camera, people scanned in pictures to us, and recommend that. Also make it fun. We have a rule around here: if we get an email in to the office of a plant, we forward it to everybody in the office there, so everybody has a chance to identify it. A real good handy group on Facebook is called Texas Flora, and it's always fun to help people identify plants there. You'll be surprised as pictures come up how many you know, and if you don't know, try to identify it before somebody else does. And so I really, you know, sticking your neck out there and being wrong is pretty humbling and fun. Every once in a while, you know, I kind of wonder if I ought to just put the wrong name out there and see if I can get a good argument going. But anyways, Texas 4 is a great asset on Facebook, and I highly recommend that group. Coach a 4-H or Plant ID team. There's 129 plants on the Texas 4-H and FFA plant list, master plant list. What a well of a core. If you learn those 129 plants, they're endemic across the entire state of Texas. Some of them are South Texas plants, some of them are East Texas plants, coastal bend plants, some of them are Trans-Pecos only, or the Texas Panhandle. Coaching a team will really fortify. One, you have to learn the plant, and then you have to be able to teach it, and then teach it at a middle school level, which is a whole lot more fun than teaching at an upper level. So in my closing here, I just want to say a few things. I want you to spend a little time, look down, look around. There goes the duck. Look down, look around, look for the opportunity to learn plants. I'll end with a quick story with the plant over here on the left. That's false Gramma. I found that while quail hunting out at Black Gap. Nobody likes to go hunting with me because I spend less time hunting and more time looking at plants. And so we'll end it with that. But look everywhere for plants. The opportunity is endless.
All right, Lee, thanks for that presentation. We'll hear from Lee again in just a little bit. But to continue the theme of Plant ID, we invite Dr. Barron Rector with Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service to discuss the world of native spurges. Dr. Rector has worked as an extension range specialist for over 40 years. Based in College Station, he supports county extension programming, conducts applied research, and educates both adults and youth on the importance of proper rangeland management and use of natural resources. We're pleased to have him here today to discuss spurges. Turn it over to you, Dr. Rector.
Thank you, Charles. And ladies and gentlemen, it is a wonderful opportunity to be with you today, because all of us and our agencies and our volunteer work with master gardeners, master naturalists, we are observant identifiers. Notice in Lee's opening talk that he didn't say go get a book with a key in it and learn how to be a plant taxonomist, and yet a lot of people are, because we learn plants in the field where we work, and we spend time with the knowledgeable people, walking around in the pasture with them to learn how to name the plant organisms that are in our area of responsibility. But here at Texas A&M, I get a lot of plants from all over the state, around 300 a year for the last 42 years to identify. And I'm working on 3 grasses right now that I don't think are recorded in the Texas flora. So the invitation today is to talk to you about the family Euphorbiaceae, and the common name of the family is spurge, the spurge family. So let's look and think about spurges. That might be a new word to you. And so you already know members of the family. So, what is the most well known spurge in the genus Euphorbia in Texas? And hint, it's used as a decorative plant and it's sold at Christmas time. So, you must be thinking about the correct plant, and certainly it is the poinsettia. And the Euphorbia pulcherrima is a commonly important plant species, but it is indigenous to Mexico, and it's well known for its red and green foliage and is widely used in Christmas floral displays. So when you look at that plant, you notice that a lot of people think that the red and green foliage are the flowers, but they're not. The flowers are very small and in the middle of the plant, and we're going to talk about that genus Euphorbia. But notice the first minister from the United States to Mexico, Joel Roberts Poinsett, he's the first one that brought the plant into the United States. So today, a lot of the poinsettia industry is in the Hawaiian Islands, but it is not native there. So here's what the plant looks like. And I'm going to use my pointer and look at the central part of these red leaf-like appendages, and the flowers are the little green circles in the middle. So the red and green up in the above and all the different colors you see in the bottom right, those are actually bracts, and they're not flowers, but they're modified leaves that we call bracts. So this is one of the more common plants that we have every day out of this family that we see once a year. So the worldwide, the family has 313 genera, with a huge number of species, around 8,100. In Texas, we have 138 species that represent 20 genera, and all of these are native out of the 138, except for 5, which are introduced species. So the members of this family are common all over the state. When we are working out on rangeland, we're going to be encountering them on our transect lines and our plots, in our diet studies of wildlife and livestock. And so many authors through time have declared that the members of this family are poisonous, or that they have a toxin that can be poisonous to livestock, and some are, but many are not poisonous in the family. So the members of the family can be the kinds of plants that we call herbs. We call them forbs. We call them subshrubs. They die back to the ground, but they're perennial, and they come back from the crown each year as a subshrub. We have real shrubs, and then we have trees, and we have some members of the family that are vines. So in the longevity, this family is represented by annuals. Plants that live for less than 1 year are biennials, plants that live in part or all of 2 years, and then perennials, plants that live a long time. And so we know about Lee's ring muley that was up in New Mexico when he was getting his master's. That ring muley, as it expands, has been documented in places that the center where the plant started and moved out is now 500 years later. So in the spurge family, the plants can be monoecious. That means having the male and female flowers on the same plant, or they can be dioecious and having the male and female flowers on different plants. Some of the members of the family have a white latex, a watery or milky juice, but many of the species do not. So when we think about these quick answers to things, there are 5 families of plants in Texas that will have a white milky latex. Not just the milkweed family, but even the sunflower family has members in it that will have white latex. So the leaf arrangement across the species in the family, they can have leaves that are arranged alternate. They can have leaves that are opposite or whorled or fascicled on short shoots. The leaves are usually simple with a couple of exceptions, some spurges that are 3 foliate or are 5 to 7 palmate leaf type leaf arrangement called compound. And so the stipule, one of the characteristics of the family, is an appendage found at the base of the petiole. And it can help you in the field if you do find the appendage, the stipule, then you know you have a spurge. So the leaf petiole, the thing that attaches the leaf to the stem, can also be present or absent, meaning that sometimes the leaves are directly attached to the stem. The leaf blade, the margins are entire, subentire, rapand, crenate, serrate, or dentate. And these are great taxonomic terms, and I don't hear people using them in the field, but they're here to show you the great variation in the plants that are in this group. The leaf veination is pinnate, so it's going to be net-like. But if it's at 3 to 7 palmate leaf, then the leaf veination is going to be palmate. And so sometimes those plants become the net leaf distally. So a lot of our forbs and woody plants, they're net leaf veined plants. The inflorescences are what we call unisexual or bisexual, and I will show a few things about that. So look at the 20 genera, and I have the common name for the genus, and I'm telling you how many species in that genus that we have. From Acalypha with 10 species, Adalia, 1 species, Androchny, 2 species, Argithamnia, the low wild mercury, 6 species, Bernardia, which are shrubs, 2 species, the Caperonia, 1 species, Nodosculus with 1 species, that famous bull nettle. Our crotons, we have 21 species, Crotonopsis, the rushfoil, we have 2 species, Euphorbia, the largest genus in the family in Texas. We have 63 species, and 2 of those are introduced. But notice my note at the bottom. All of these plants are considered to be warm season, except for 6 species that are cool season in the genus Euphorbia. So, Jatropha, nettle spurge, 3 species, Julocroton, 1 species, Manihot, 1 species, Phyllanthus, leaf flower. 6 of them are native, 1 is introduced. Reversionia has 1 species. Ricinus, castor bean, also introduced, only 1 in the Ricinus genus. Sapium, the tallow tree, introduced, 1 species in that genus. Sebastiania, 1 species. Stillingia, we have 3 species, and Tragia, the noseburn, we have 10 species, and that makes up your list. So when I go in to look at the taxonomy and look at pictures, a book that I had on my master's in plant taxonomy, Vascular Plant Systematics, it has drawings of the family like this. And all of these drawings are based on 1 genus, the Euphorbia, that's in this diagram that you see. And so that would be the group that poinsettia is in. So the cyanthium is this whole thing in the picture here. But if I look at, I have the female flower at the end here. I have the stamen with the pollen down at the base. But look, I have nectar glands in the Euphorbia genus, and then I have nectar gland appendages that are there to attract pollinators. So this whole thing is kind of in a cup-like structure, the involucre. And so when I take a side view, look here at the stamen that are down at the base of the plant, down in here at the bottom of the cup, and the stigma, with a lot of these plants having 3 to 6 stigma up on top, the female part, for accepting the pollen. And so the staminate flower, the male flower, it actually has parts. When I look at the brachiole, I look at the pedicel, and I look up at the top where the stigmatic material is. In this picture, the fruit in the family is called a schizocarp, but the common name for schizocarp that we use in the field is we call it a capsule. And one of the unique things about this family is that most of the capsules are 3-locular, as you see in the drawing here, 3 different parts, and inside there is 1 seed. So that's the number one characteristic of the family, but it doesn't always hold true. And then look at the top of the capsule, you see the old stigmatic material is adhering to the capsule. It doesn't fall off until late in life. When those capsules break open, the schizocarp, and I'm going to have dehiscence of the seed, these 2 parts break apart, and then the seed falls out on the ground. So think about dove and quail coming after the seed of a goatweed, and that's coming out of a capsule that's just like this. So the whole thing at the center of the capsule, where the 3 seed attach, is called a columnella. It is the axis in the middle of the capsule and is very important to the septicidal dehiscence of the seed. And the seed have 2 flat surfaces on the inside, and then they have a rounded surface. And in quail crops, the seed of crotons or doveweed, quail seed, goatweed, they're easy to pick up. And because they may be mottled or different colors, they're easy to identify back to the plant. So all these plant parts are used in describing. So this euphorbia is just a repeat drawing. As Lee said, drawings can be good, but I can see the nectar glands. I can see the 3-lobed perianth, and I can see where the capsule is and the stigmas. So this is what we're looking for in the family. And even down in the cyanthium, I can find the pollen producing stamen and see the glands. So here's another picture of what that looks like on Euphorbia dentata. And the nectar glands stick out. So isn't this a funny looking type of flower arrangement compared to our bluebonnets, compared to our Indian blanket, compared to the Texas paintbrush? So this is unique. And once I learn how to observe this, I'm going to be able to see that in the field. So on the sandy sites from Canada to Mexico, we have bull nettle, and this is the genus Nodoscelus. This is one that is covered with hypodermic needles that if I get into the plant, I'm going to get stuck, and then I'm going to end up, usually most people will have a rash. But look down here on the bottom of the flowering stem and look at all the hairs that are down there. And then here's what, and this is from the University of Texas and the Lundell Herbarium. Here's what a mount would look like. Could you take the mount, take a drawing, or take a scanned image or a photograph and be able to identify a plant? That's the backup material that we have available to help us in the field. Another important euphorbia, this is Euphorbia antisyphilitica called Candelia, that grows in the Trans-Pecos. And even for World War II, when we're trying to make oil, This plant was planted in an orchard style, and it never worked because they irrigated it, and the plant loves 10 inches of rain, not 50, so it never grew to make the oil, the wax that's in this plant. A common one in South Texas and in gardening is the castor bean. And the castor bean, the whole plant is toxic, but the beans are the most toxic part, even though there's a valuable castor oil in the plant that's used in lubrication as well as medicinal purposes. But in this one, look, the male flowers are at the top, the pink ones, and all the white ones down here are the females, where the ovary with the eggs is going to be. So this was formerly valued as a purgative and even used as a machine oil. Commonly in the east central part of Texas, in the East Texas, the most common croton, doveweed, quail seed, goatweed is this woolly croton that you see in the picture. And it has a lot of stellate hairs on it that give it a hair covering, also called hogwort. But look at the leaf, you can see the white texture or the stellate hairs. The Indians use these crotons as a laxative, but they remove the hairs. The stellate hairs act like glass. They get in your small intestine, cut the small intestine up, and you bleed to death internally. So even though the Indians ate it, go ask an Indian how they prepared it. And yet we extirpated most of them. And in this woolly croton, notice with my pointer, right up here is a cluster of male flowers with only the pollen, and over here is the female flower. So it is not uncommon for the flowers to be separated, and this is what it looks like in the field right now in the drought conditions that we've been in, and yet the plant grows up to 6 feet. This is one seed croton, and right here is Texas croton, and right here is Tory croton. And so look at the variability between these plants. This is grassland croton that grows out at San Angelo and in the western third of Texas. This is Bernardia myricifolia, called Southwest Bernardia. It is a much bigger shrub, and at Austin, it grows to 12 foot tall. But this is the desert version, Bernardia obovata, called desert myrtle croton. There are only 3 myrtle crotons in the United States, and we have 2 of them. But look at the male flower of Bernardia myricifolia and then Bernardia obovata, and then look at the female flower with 3 sets of fimbriate, feathery stigma. And then this is the 2-lobe. This is an exception that we learned from our English teachers. And so the capsule of Southwest Bernardia is 3 locular, and down in the desert one, it only has 2 locules and 2 seed. But they have things with glands that attract ants, attract pollinators. These plants have glands all over them in their adaptation to wet and dry climate. I can learn about the parts of that leaf and why they're adapted. And at the youth range workshop, all the green plants in the foreground are Stellingia texana, Texas Queen's Delight. And this is what a phyllanthus or a knotweed leaf flower looks like. Here are the spurges in the bottom of the picture with a red dot on the leaf. This is a common one in sidewalks and in yards. And here's one, Acalytha austrifolia. This is taken at San Marcos on the Freeman Ranch. There's the Chinese tallow tree with its spade-shaped leaf and its invasion of all of southeast Texas, and a real problem. This is one seed croton, doveweed, quail seed, or prairie tea, and the Indians made it. Snow on the mountain, snow on the prairie, have white, acrid, milky juice. But look at that flower arrangement. Ladies and gentlemen, thank you so much. It's been a pleasure to talk to you. It's my favorite family. And Lee said the grasses were his. Thank you, Megan.
Thank you so much, Dr. Rector. Appreciate that. It was a great presentation. I'll turn it over to you, Tim.
Thanks, Megan. So next up, we have Chip Ruthven, who will speak on common sunflowers, silphiums, and salvias. Chip has been the project leader for the Panhandle Wildlife Management Areas for Texas Parks and Wildlife Department since 2004. Prior to that, he was a biologist and assistant wildlife management area manager at the Chaparral Wildlife Management Area near Cotulla, Texas, for over 9 years. Welcome to the Plant Party, Chip, and I'll turn it over to you to talk to us.
I'm going to start out with Engelmann daisy, which is a common perennial forb found throughout much of Texas. You can see the range map down there in the bottom. It's one of the most palatable forbs we have out there for livestock and a lot of wildlife species such as white-tailed deer. As you can see, it's found over most of the state. It's a cool season perennial forb, so you'll see it blooming in the early spring and through early summer. Typically you'll see it quite common on the highway right-of-ways, but you look across the fence in a lot of cases, and you will not see Engelmann daisy just because it is so highly palatable under heavy grazing pressure, whether it's from domestic livestock or wild ungulates like white-tailed deer. It can be eliminated from the landscape. So where you see Engelmann daisy out on the landscape in open rangeland type situations, you're looking at range conditions that are generally probably good to excellent range conditions because of the presence of Engelmann daisy. Again, cool season, perennial plant. You can look down at the bottom right down here, you can see the rosettes, which typically come out in the winter. So it is providing some forage during the winter, goes into bloom in early spring. Up here in the upper right, you can see it has a characteristic that in the middle of the day, in the heat of the day, to conserve water, the leaf petals will actually curl back upon themselves to conserve water. And even though it's a cool season perennial with adequate moisture, it will bloom throughout most of the summer. We'll move on to another member of the sunflower family, another native perennial sunflower, again found throughout much of the state. Again, highly palatable to livestock and wildlife such as white-tailed deer. If you see it on the range landscape, again, indicator of good rangeland health. It typically has the discs tend to be a little bit more yellow in color compared to some of your other sunflowers. Long lanceolate shaped leaves is another good identifying characteristic of Maximilian sunflower. Very common through the hill country. This is a warm season perennial, so its peak flower is typically late summer into early fall, and throughout much of the state, it should be in peak flower right about now, especially down through the hill country. But another good, excellent plant to have out there from a livestock and wildlife standpoint. If you see it out on the landscape, you're typically looking at rangelands that are in good to excellent range condition. Okay, if we got common sunflower up there, it's many varieties of annual sunflowers we have here in the state. On the left is common sunflower. You can see the range map. There we go. Down there in the bottom right, a fairly large species of sunflower. Typically, if you look at a stand of sunflowers and you see a lot of individuals that may be 6, 7, 8, 9, even 10 feet tall or more, it's typically annual sunflower found throughout the state. Those of y'all that are down on the coast, you get a similar looking species with more of a silvery colored leaf. It's called silverleaf sunflower, more of a gray green shaped leaf. On the right there is one of the other varieties of annual sunflower. This is plains or prairie sunflower. They're annuals, so they respond positively to soil disturbance to germinate and grow. You will soil disturbance such as hoof action by livestock, prescribed fire disking will stimulate the germination of many of your annual sunflowers, like these two particular species here. One way to separate your annual sunflower from some of your other varieties is not only the tall growth form, but the leaves. On common sunflower, the lower leaves in particular will be quite large, typically larger than your hand. Whereas with some of your other species of sunflower, much smaller leaves, And typically, they don't, a lot of the other species typically don't get more than about 4 or 5 feet tall. During the early growth stage, they can be palatable to livestock and other wildlife species such as white-tailed deer. But again, you'll typically see sunflowers on highly disturbed sites. And of course, they're a great seed producer for a wide variety of wildlife. Compass plant, Silphium, again, it's a member of the sunflower family, or Asteraceae, or Compositae for some of us old timers as we learned it. Compass plant is again found in these range maps back here. It's found in a lot more counties than those range maps indicate, but it's common throughout many parts of the eastern part of the state. Again, this particular species is highly palatable to livestock and wildlife such as white-tailed deer. So a lot of times you may see it on the highway right away, but you may not see it across the fence because of overgrazing. But the compass plant, the common name, typically comes from the way the leaves orient. The leaves typically orient north to south to maximize exposure to sunlight, is where the common name compass plant comes in. Rosin weed is another common name for the compass plants as well. White rosin weed. This one, the leaf structure is very similar to the compass plant. Some of the other species of Silphium have a more typical sunflower-shaped leaf, but these have those deeply lobed or cut leaves that help identify these particular species. This one is actually a Texas endemic, found on calcareous soils in parts of the cross timbers and down into the western Edwards Plateau. It is typically another a plant that indicates fairly good range conditions when you see it out on the landscape. Go ahead and go to the last group of plants that we have are salvias. We have blue sage, also called pitcher sage. Again, fairly common over much of the state, especially from the panhandle down through the hill country and the coast on into East Texas. It's a perennial. I forgot to mention both the Silphium species I just showed are also perennial plants. But blue sage or pitcher sage is a species of sage that is very palatable to livestock and wildlife. So again, when you typically see it, you're looking at range lands that are typically in good to excellent condition. It's a late summer, early fall flowering forb. So it'll be in peak flower now, maybe a little bit past peak flower right now. The tubular-shaped flowers are typical of this particular family of this particular family of sages, and excellent for hummingbirds. Obviously with the hummingbird migration coming on there right now, birds moving south. The timing of the flowering of this plant is ideal for hummingbirds. Also extremely important for pollinators. Here you can see a bumblebee foraging on the flowers in the upper right hand corner of this particular blue sage. But excellent for pollinators. A lot of folks don't think of the importance of our flowers for pollinators, but they are critical for our many variety of pollinators, whether they're flies and wasps, to bees and butterflies and moths. Last slide I have is another sage species. This is mealy-cup sage, very common in the hill country and up through portions of the cross timbers into the rolling plain, into the Blackland Prairie a little bit, and out into the Trans-Pecos. This one, again, another perennial plant, tends to flower throughout most of the summer. Is not very palatable to livestock or deer. So this plant can actually be quite prolific out on rangeland landscapes, and like I say, it's not an indicator plant of good range conditions per se. It's some of the other species are because it's low palatability to wildlife and livestock. But again, another important plant for providing nectar for a wide variety of pollinators out there. Thank you all for the invite.
All right. Thanks, Chip. That was a great presentation. We'll move right into our next presentation. Again, we're going to have Lee Knox come back and talk to us. He's going to talk about the Gramma grasses. Lee, we appreciate you sharing your knowledge with us one more time, and I'll turn it over to you.
I appreciate this opportunity to talk about the Gramma grasses. I want to start with is, again, I said this, mentioned this earlier, that this is our core. This is where I start every 4-H'er in our program. The gamma grasses are endemic to most of the part of Texas. They kind of rule in West Texas. That's the reason I have this nice Trans-Pecos picture here. And so, but they're very teachable. My mode of action is a little bit different in my presentation. I'm actually going to go through those plants and try to show everybody the characteristics that we teach. And so on my computer screen, I'm pretty sure you can see it. You can see my mouse pointer. And so right now I have that pointer sitting in the Trans-Pecos picture. So I will use that to highlight characteristics of those plants, or key identifying points, as John Paslick calls them, to identify those plants. And so it's amazing to me that I'm actually giving this talk. I'll give you a little quick story. I was on the Texas A&M plant identification team, and Dr. Knight coached that team for over 30 years. And I'm not sure why I was on it. He wasn't for sure why I was on it. And at one point in time, he looked at me and said, Lee, you're not much of an asset for my team. And said, I can take a hint. And so I did ERMI, the undergraduate range management exam. And I focused more on that instead of the plant ID. But 25, 30 years later, I'm back at it again. And so I appreciate the opportunity. So the plants we're going to go over today are, we're going to split these up. We're the patriotic Grammas, and it's the buffalo grass, Side Oaks Gramma, and Texas Gramma. It's hard for me to include buffalo grass as a Gramma because on the master plant list, if you look down here, it's Buclodactyloides. That's the old name, but it has been moved into the Boutelouis. And because of that, we're going to go ahead and include it in the Grammas. There's a lot of good teaching points when it comes to buffalo grass also. I split the other ones into the eyebrow Grammas, and these are the other ones that are on the master plant list. And just for fun, I threw 2 unique Grammas in. They're not on the master plant list, but they're unique enough in different parts of the state that I think they warrant talking about. So they're a little bit of fun. So let's go to the next slide. So we talk about the patriotic Grammas. Now, you need to remember, I teach this to, 4-H starts in the 3rd grade. And so we teach these plants to anywhere from 3rd graders to high schoolers. And so when we don't use really scientific nomenclature or terms. Number one, I can't remember them. And number 2 is the kids could care less. And so I teach, and my preface is I'm teaching this at a middle school level. And so this is how I would do this with the middle schoolers or even younger. So we talk about the patriotic Grammas, and they're patriotic because they have flags. You can see the flags coming off, or they have bells. There's nothing more patriotic than a flag or a bell. So we're going to go a little more into detail in these 3 patriotic Grammas: buffalo grass, Side Oaks Gramma, and Texas Gramma. So buffalo grass is a common grass across all the state of Texas. It's used in landscape situations now. And so here are the male, and the males are flags. And so this plant is unique. If you go to this far right bottom corner, it has male plants and female plants, totally separate plants. So in the picture above, that is a colony of males. You will have a colony of males and you'll have a colony of females. So these are the males, and they have flags. The females, we commonly say they have burrs. The 4-H kids make fun of me because I say they look like little bombs from cartoon bombs. They never agree. So anyways, they insult me about it, but I got a thick skin. So anyways, they are burrs. and on the females, and they are down in part of the plant. They would be down here in this section of the plant, whereas the males are up high on totally separate plants. That makes them a little bit unique. Buffalo grass also has the technical term is stolen. We use the term runner with kids, so they have runners. This one, so the way to identify the buffalo grass runner is this stem is slick. It doesn't have any hairs on it. And as a picture, this picture is a really hairy buffalo grass. One thing I've noticed with pulling pictures off of the internet, I'm good at stealing pictures, is the farther north you go, it seems like there's more hair on the plants. And I don't know if that's true across all of them, but on the grasses, I noticed when I pull pictures, there seems to be more hairs on those plants the farther north you go. It's either that or my eyes are failing me and I just don't see as much hair as I used to. And so anyways, it's a really bare plant, but buffalo grass is the only one of the patriotic grammas that has a runner. Cytos Gramma, the state grass of Texas. This plant is almost on every plant ID contest, and but not all of them. And so it has, these are rather erect cytotes. They tend to droop a little bit more, but they still maintain this flag shape. There's actually 3 to 5 florets in making up that flag when it comes to Cytos Gramma. And so this plant, most of them are highly rhizomatous or have a underground stem, modified stem. And so this plant is attached to that plant, it's attached to that plant, attached to that plant. I took this picture while listening to a fire ecology talk at the range camp. And I was sitting underneath a live oak mott trying to stay cool. And I started digging around and took this picture of the rhizomes of the Cytos Gramma plant. These plants also have these hairs coming off of a zit, as we say with the kids. I think the technical term is a papilla-based hair, but Cytos Gramma has those coming off of it. Klein grass does the exact same thing, but Klein grass has a prominent midrib. And if you look, Cytos Gramma does not have a prominent midrib. And so this is a picture of a complete plant, and it's very robust. And these would all be attached by either rhizomes or short stubby rhizomes. So that's Cytos Gramma, state grass of Texas, and another one of the patriotics. Texas Gramma, the characteristics for Texas Gramma are perennial warm native pore. And I've always found it interesting that we name a plant Texas Gramma, and it's not very good for wildlife, and it's not very good for livestock grazing. But it is Texas Gramma. Both Texas Gramma and Cytos Gramma have this kind of wavy stem where the seeds attached at one point in time, but you can see that these are very much bell-shaped and very much hang down. Texas Gramma, it's not a very big plant. You can see that's the bottom wire on the barbed wire fence, maybe 18, it's not 18, probably 8 inches tall. And that's about as big as a Texas Gramma plant gets. Very easy to identify when it has seeds. When it doesn't have seeds, it resembles a buffalo grass plant without any runners. The best way I can describe it. So now we jokingly go into the eyebrow grasses. And I use these little icons here to differentiate them. Or not icons, emojis here. Here's my emoji, big bushy eyebrows, mustache, and a set of glasses. And so we split the eyebrow grammas into big bushy eyebrows and then really thin, light eyebrows, or very feminine maybe eyebrows. And so we split them in that way. Blue Gramma and hairy Gramma have these really bushy eyebrows, and you can see these are the eyebrows. There's actually, the eyebrow is made up of a bunch of florets hanging off of, and I think the technical term is a raceme. A friend of mine told me that the other day. And so anyways, those florets hang off of there. These are actually individual seeds coming down. If you look on this black Gramma, that's an individual seed. There's about 10 of them on here. But these are really light and feathery on the black Gramma and red Gramma, really bushy. You cannot see through them on the blue Gramma and hairy Gramma. So blue Gramma, help you remember, it is a state grass of New Mexico. And so, and it is being used in landscape situations now. We see this really commonly here in the Abilene area, that blue Gramma is used in the landscape area. One interesting thing that we've observed over time, we very seldom see blue Gramma in a natural landscape below 2,000 feet elevation. I don't know if that holds true everywhere, but it sure holds true in this part of the world. And so blue Gramma, there, and if you look at the seed, that stem or raceme that those seeds hang off of, it does not extend past the last seed, and that's the defining characteristic between it and hairy Gramma. Blue Gramma does have some hair, but it is not predominantly hairy. It's very hard to see. There's no hair on the nodes, very much a bunch grass, and it does have some rhizomatous behavior, but very little. Hairy Gramma, the other one, it's called hairy Gramma for two reasons. One is the seed head looks kind of hairy. If you look, that raceme or that stem extends over here on that left picture past the last seed, and we call that a stinger. And so that's how we identify those with the 4-Hers. It is a much hairier plant whenever you see it. And so in there, it's a papillus base hair. There's a scientific. It does have some of those, but they're not as predominant as hairy as side oaks Gramma. But hairy Gramma, very easy to identify, patriotic flag with a stinger. So now we're going to go to the hairy, or I mean the eyelashes or the eyebrows that are really thin. These plants, I mentioned this plant earlier in my previous talk, black Gramma. It grows primarily in west central Texas and west and north, and it kind of grows in our loamy areas in this part of the world. And so really thin eyebrow that you can see through. Don't let the color fool you, it changes. It does have stolons or above ground runners. The key characteristic is, and you can see this from several feet away, is this alternating on this right picture, this gray, and then it goes to tan when the plant is dormant, and it goes to green when the plant is green or in actively growing. It goes tan, or it goes gray to green in color, gray to green or gray to tan, and then it alternates it as it goes up the stem. Very upright growing plant. Oh, I went the wrong way. Okay, red Gramma, learned this trick from a conversation just 2 days ago. Did not know this. Let's stay with the eyebrows though. With the eyebrows, really thin eyebrows, you can see not very big, not very prominent. And but I learned this other trick with this plant is it's red Gramma and it has these red nodes. And so there's the node right there, and those nodes are red. This is a very little plant. It very seldom is above 4 or 5 inches tall. If you're ranching this and that's your primary forage source, you're probably going to go broke. It's not grazed very much, and because of that, you get these dead rings, and so the center is dead. That plant originally was in the middle, and it has over the years grown out, and then the center remains dead in the center, and that's primarily due to loss of grazing or lack of grazing, and then the old plants die and the new, more productive plants live. Red Gramma, really easy plant to teach. The seed heads on it are almost always red also. So those were our core. When we go to the plant contest, I guarantee you we've never had a contest that did not have at least 1 Gramma on it. And so that's the reason we teach it as a core. And you can ask any of my 4-Hers and they will tell you those are our cores. And as a general rule, they do not miss the Grammas on the contest. So let's go to some unique Grammas. Chino Gramma and one flower Gramma. Chino Gramma, and I did put the scientific name on it because it's a little bit harder to find this plant just by Googling. And so it grows in the Trans-Pecos area. It's really unique. It has, you can see it would be an eyebrow Gramma. They curl much more when it gets more mature. The leaves you can see are really curly on it. This plant is unique. And so with a few plants, bush muley, tobosa grass, they actually have, they will produce new plants up in the canopy of that plant. And so, or not new plants, but initiate new growth up in the canopy of the plant. Most grasses, when they initiate new growth, is down in the crown in the base of the plant. But tobosa and this plant and bush muley, they all have the ability to initiate growth elevated up into the plant. So it looks like there's a whole lot of forage there, but you may be looking at 2- and 3-year-old forages. I also read in a book from the Black Gap area, I think the Penwell area, how they used to harvest this as a fodder for livestock for the cavalry back in around the turn of the century. They would actually harvest the Chino Gramma and haul it in. The other one that's really unique, and a lot of people don't know about this plant. When I worked down in the heart of the hill country, this plant is endemic to that area. So the light green are the boxes in which it's recorded. I used to work down in Kendall and Kerr, Rial and Edwards counties down in that part of the world. And I originally thought I was just looking at a shaded out side oaks Gramma, but it's really a new plant. It's one flower Gramma or Bouteloua uniflora. And so as it's defined, instead of side oaks Gramma has 3 to 5 florets in this flag, this plant only has 1 floret. And so it looks like a frail or doing poorly side oaks Gramma. We typically found it growing in the understory of live oaks, and in that part of the world are associated with the overstory of live oaks. And it is, you can see by this plant mound, it is slightly rhizomatous also. Doesn't seem to be as long of rhizomes as what's on side oaks Gramma. But Bouteloua uniflora or one seed Gramma is another unique Gramma I think's worth talking about, and you can see where it's found. So if you find what you think is side oaks Gramma and you think it's and you think it's doing poorly, you may want to look and see how many florets it has. But I appreciate the opportunity to talk about the Grammas. And
that was a great presentation, Lee. We really appreciate that. That was, I think, there were a lot of good comments there and from folks about how much they enjoyed that. But that brings us to our last speaker today for this plant party, and that is our very own Dr. Megan Clayton. So you already know her as one of the plant party hosts, but Megan has been with the Range Extension Specialist with AgriLife Extension since 2010. So she spent 12 years in Corpus Christi as an extension center, and just recently, this past summer, transferred to Uvalde. So she considers herself very blessed to be able to support county extension programming and to work with wonderful collaborators like myself and Charles, of course. So we're looking forward to hearing Megan, and Megan, we'll let you take it away talking about plant identification resources for our attendees.
Thank you, Tim, and absolutely working with you and Charles is a huge blessing. All right, so to wrap up, we thought we would talk a little bit about different plant ID resources that I'm sure a lot of you already use, but maybe you'll pick up 1 or 2 more places to go here. So where do you go when you don't know a plant, and how do you start to work through that with some of the resources, technology available to you today? So first of all, we have heard today about how important plant identification is, and I want to end on that note as well. We know that if you can't see, if you don't know a plant, you can't see it. And I've seen that so many times. I'll learn a new plant and suddenly it's everywhere I go. So definitely learning your plants helps you to really appreciate nature more and start to see nature for what it is and those plant communities for what they really can provide for us. And then, of course, our perceived value can differ. Some people say that they love certain plants that other people may wish would not be on their place. And that's just because of our value system. Maybe our goals for the property differ, but no matter which plant is on our place, native or introduced, they're all providing different things onto the landscape that make us have to make that decision about whether it's of value in that place or not. And then, of course, what's the plant's place in the ecosystem? So I know a lot of times people talk negatively about annual weeds that come up when there's a lot of bare ground, but those weeds are something that's really holding our soil and something that's going to help us to have good soil in the future to allow some of those other plants to establish later on in succession. So everything has a value. So I want to make sure we reiterate that, and identifying them is your way to start to learn what that value might be. So let's talk about some resources. First up is Rangeland Plants of Texas database. This is kind of my go-to for plants in Texas that we commonly get questions about. This site has about 400 of the most popular plants that we talk about regularly. What I love about the site, not only that it's for Texas only, but that it says, help me identify my plant. You can click on that button. It'll take you to a page where there's a number of different characteristics, such as flower color, whether it's a grassophorb or a brush species, where in the state you might be, a lot of different characteristics that can narrow down that specific plant. And then, of course, we have the opportunity to look at each plant on their own plant page. It tells a little bit about the description of the plant, where you might find that plant growing. And if it's toxic, it'll talk about the different toxicities and what livestock might exhibit if they were to eat that plant. And then, of course, my favorite aspect of this is that we have plant pictures, both up close plant parts and that plant growing in the field, because sometimes when you pull out just one piece of a plant, it just doesn't look the same to you as it did when it was growing in the field with its other plants in its community. So all of these things have combined to make a pretty cool plant site for you to go to. And again, that was rangeplants.tamu.edu. We currently have 20 or 30 Texas Master Naturalist volunteers who work with us on this site to update it regularly, to edit the plants that are already on this page to make sure they have the best information on them. And also to add new plants that might be their favorites to the site. And if you're interested in doing that, just get with me later and we will add you to our group. My Tree ID is a fantastic resource for identifying trees in Texas. This app is put out by our Texas A&M Forest Service, and it's available for both Android and Apple products. You can see that they also have where you can narrow down the list of trees by different characteristics. They have some beautiful pictures in here of trees and their up close plant parts. And then it's really cool. I always point out that there's a tree age estimator. And those of you who have heard me talk before know that when people ask me the age of a tree, I always say 99 years. So if you want to actually get to the age of a tree, that's one way that you can kind of start to estimate some you might have on your property. Pretty interesting. Next up is East Texas Wildflowers and its counterpart, West Texas Wildflowers, which are apps that have over 2,000 plants in them. Pretty fantastic. They're free apps to download for you. And I love that they have really neat, easy to narrow down characteristics such as this leaf arrangement, where you can compare that to your plant and select which one most mimics that. And of course, flower color and a lot of other things. I think people think about wildflowers just as our weedy wildflowers that we see during the spring, but this actually includes a lot of shrubs, vines, cacti, all kinds of plants that you might find in different situations. So not only on rangelands, but maybe even in your backyard. Seek by iNaturalist. I know many of you are iNaturalist citizen scientists that add good nature information and pictures to the iNaturalist site and kind of keep a log of all of those plants and animals or insects that you've seen. Seek is kind of a spinoff of that. Seek allows you to take a picture of pretty much anything in nature, like this butterfly that's in this picture here, and it will identify that for you. Fantastic way that my kids now think that I am a genius because I can identify so many things, but really it's Seek that's doing it for me. You can also do plants through Seek, although I'll warn you that a lot of times the more difficult to identify plants that I've tried to use Seek with have not been all that successful, but it is successful for other people. So I still like to include this website, and it is a really nice log of those plants that you found. So you can take a picture, save that into your file, and you're going to have kind of a running list of those plants that you found on your place. Picture This is also a really great plant app, but it works a little bit differently. It's actually using artificial intelligence to look at the different characteristics of those plants and help to narrow down what plant that could be, rather than simply trying to match that with stock photos that it has available to it. This Picture This app does cost money. So for a year-long subscription, it's going to be $40. For just a week, it might be $2.79. So it might be worth trying out. They do have a trial where you can get it for free, but be sure that you cancel because it will ding your credit card after that trial is up if you have not gone in and physically canceled. But Picture This is another great resource, and a lot of people really love this app. Google Lens is another app that I use regularly, and I guess I'm a little bit ashamed to say that because it's Google, but Google Lens is the Google search box that has a little photograph or a camera picture next to it down here. You'll click on that and you'll take a picture or pull one up from your photos in your phone, and it will actually search its Google database for pictures that look like it. And I have to say, it'll actually get you to family the majority of the time. So pretty cool resource that you likely already have on your phones or tablets. iPhones also come with a really cool extra feature. If you take pictures with your iPhone and they're in your photos file, you can pull up that photo, and on the bottom, it'll likely have a little eye with a star by it, and that star is indicating that it has more information about it. Click on that eye and then click on look up that plant, and it'll tell you what your plant is. So pretty cool resource that may already be built into the phone or tablet that you're using. And then I'd like to finish with my favorite plant ID books. I know you've heard of several here today. While I'm talking about my books, feel free to type in what apps or websites you use most. So not ones you've heard of, but those that are your go-tos that you would really want to encourage other people to utilize as well. So my favorite ID books range from the Range Plants of North Central Texas, which we've already heard about. Obviously, you need this book. It used to be a big spiral bound book, kind of a floppy book, and it sold for around $25 from our Soil, Water, and Conservation District offices or direct from Botanical Research Institute of Texas. They now have created a hardback version of it, and that one's running about $40. So if you see that it's a little bit more, it's likely because they've upgraded the binding on the book. Very good book to have on your shelf. The Brush and Weeds of Texas Rangelands and the Toxic Plants of Texas, those are both out of print currently through the A&M system. And so Dr. Rector and I are currently working with authors to update those two books. The Brush and Weeds of Texas Rangelands includes all of the plants that we have in our ERM 1466 chemical reference guide for extension. And then the Toxic Plants of Texas is a fantastic book that has most of the toxic plants, at least the ones that are economically important in Texas, that may cause livestock some sort of distress or death. So two really fantastic resources that we're hoping to have available for publication again or purchased soon. They are currently on our rangeplants.tamu.edu website. If you just click on that book, it'll pull up the plants that are in those two books. The Common Woody Plants and Cacti of South Texas by Richard Taylor is this little tiny black book. I think I worked in Corpus Christi and now in Uvalde, so a lot of South Texas work. And this is a really cool book that divides the brush of South Texas into the thorned and unthorned plants. It also talks about the crude protein value to white-tailed deer. It also talks about the historical uses of these brush plants. And I just love that. I think it brings to light a whole lot of more information to assign a value to a lot of these mixed brush plants than what you normally would see. And then the Field Guide to Common Texas Grasses by Hatch, I picked out as one of my favorite grass books because they actually have scanned in images of those plants. I know they were talking earlier about how a sketch is very helpful for seeing how those plant parts all come together. But when you look at an actual plant, it's easier, I think, to compare to the one that you're trying to identify. And so I appreciate that they've done that in that book. And then the last one is a selfish plug where the blue stem grasses in Texas, 3 co-authors and I created a small book simply about the blue stems because they're quite confusing. There's actually 21 native blue stem grasses in Texas and 6 introduced grass species. So most of what we see in the blue stems are native plants, and they all have varying uses and values. And then, of course, we have our 6 introduced species that are broken down even further by different ecotypes that may have been planted. So that one is available on Flywire. So here's my email address and, of course, website, southtexasrangelands.tamu.edu, where we have our plant party tab, where you can click on that and view any of our past plant parties. Or if you're on Facebook, you can check us out at Texas Range Extension.
Thank you so much, Megan, for that presentation on those resources. I know a lot of people have been asking about those and looking for them. I would like to thank again our door prize sponsors, Bammert Seed, InView Range and Pasture, Native American Seed, Quell Forever, Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service, Texas Brigades, and USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service. We appreciate your support for Plant Party. Thanks again to all of our speakers and to all of you for attending our 12th Plant Party webinar. Again, Plant Party is a quarterly advanced plant webinar training series brought to you by USDA Natural Resources Conservation Service, Texas Parks and Wildlife Department, and Texas A&M AgriLife Extension Service. We'll be sending a link to a short survey by email, or you can type in the address you see there on the screen and chat box. Or we'll pop up the QR code that you can simply hold your phone camera over and click on the link that pops up. Be sure to join us for our next plant party, which will be on December 20th, 2023, all about evergreens. So go ahead and bring your Christmas cheer for some green fun. We'll send an email with more information to all the past registrants. Thanks again.